Well, thanks for joining us. I'm going to be talking all about the MLS Home Price Index today, why it's important, and why it's so much better than any other measure out there. A lot of ground to cover, so let's just dive right in. First of all, most importantly, why an MLS Home Price Index? Well, averages and medians can swing wildly from one month to the next, depending on the difference in the sales mix from one month to the next. I always liken it to taking the average height of a class of kids, line them up from shortest to tallest, take the average height, and excuse the 10 tallest kids, and take the average height again, and well, the average the average height declines, but none of the kids have gotten any shorter. And the same thing with median and average prices. It's really dependent on the mix of sales from one month to the next as to how it shapes up. As a result of those wide swings from one month to the next that depend on the change in the sales mix, those swings can be often misinterpreted and sometimes even misrepresented. And the MLS Home Price Index overcomes the shortcomings of average and median prices in that they're not affected by the change in the sales mix the way that averages and medians are. The reason that the MLS Home Price Index is better than all the other measures out there is pretty simple. It's the most current. It's available at the very beginning of the month for the previous month. Moreover, it's more detailed and more accurate than any other measure out there. It identifies turning points, changes in price trends sooner than any other measure out there, and it avoids identifying false changes in price trends, avoids head fakes, if you will. Changes in price trends matter. They matter to realtors, to sellers, to buyers, to policymakers, and to mortgage lenders. So pretty important stuff. The way it measures price, let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. It's like the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. It measures a basket of services and goods. Well, the Home Price Index measures home price based on a basket of housing features, the most commonly traded housing features. Housing features are either quantitative in nature or qualitative in nature. Quantitative being number of bedrooms, number of square footage of living area above ground, the age of the home, and a host of other things that can be measured in numbers. Qualitative features, things like has it been substantially renovated, does it have a fireplace, and also what's its proximity to schools, golf courses, parks, shopping, and a number of other locational factors, because location, very important, and it takes that into account as well. Let's talk about what the HPI tracks. The HPI is a relative measure of price, so it measures price now as compared to January of 2005, which is the base period. So it's always compared to January of 2005, January 2005 being 100, and some variation off of 100 going forward, because it's relative to January of 2005. You've got separate sub-indices for benchmark housing types. You've got, it tracks the benchmark price and the HPI for one-story homes, single-family homes, two-story single-family homes, townhouse row units, and condos. And for the aggregation of all of those, single-family homes is an aggregation of one- and two-story homes as well. But each of those four benchmark types have their own index. And it all relies on benchmark prices. Benchmark prices are the foundation on which the HPI is built. So let's talk about benchmark prices and what benchmark homes are. What benchmark homes are is a fixed set of features that are common to that neighborhood. I was talking a little bit about qualitative and quantitative features. So at the sub-area level, I casually refer to them as neighborhood level, it takes the median of any of the quantitative housing features, number of bedrooms and so forth, and it takes the most commonly occurring things for those qualitative things. So if most homes have a fireplace, then that would be one of the things that makes up the description for a benchmark home in that sub-area. Now, housing stock, of course, differs from one sub-area to the next, and those benchmark housing descriptions from one sub-area to the next differ. But in each of those sub-areas, they're held constant over time, and in that way, you're comparing apples to apples to apples to apples to apples over time for that sub-area. And through the magic of what's known as Fisher chain price indexing, the same way in which GDP is calculated, you can aggregate those sub-areas up to the zone and to the board area itself. So it answers the need for a constant quality home price measure, which is impossible with averages and medians. Right now, the HPI is available for the 5 400 boards, which began to publish in January of 2012, Greater Vancouver, Fraser Valley, Calgary, Toronto, and Montreal, and for the aggregation thereof. And since then, Regina, Saskatoon, and Ottawa have joined, and soon to be released, Victoria and Vancouver Island. It's under construction. In fact, it's been completed for Quebec City, and we expect them to begin publishing before the end of the year. And it's under construction right now for Moncton. There are plans for further expansion of the HPI. There are 9 more housing markets that are eligible for inclusion in an expanded HPI. Eligibility is based on the contribution of sales in a particular market as it relates to the province and as the province relates to the national sales activity. Victoria and Van Island were eligible, and they've joined, and it's a great thing. I was talking a little bit earlier about the volatility of average price and median price as it compares to the MLS Home Price Index. And what I've done here is I've compared on a chart for Canada the MLS Home Price Index compared to the average price for MLS home sales, comparing that also to the Terranet National Bank Index and to the New Home Price Index published by Statistics Canada for new home construction. The red line shows just how volatile average price can be. And again, that refers to the change in the sales mix geographically across Canada over time. And then you've got the MLS Home Price Index. Because you're making an apples-to-apples comparison, it's a much more stable picture because it's not affected by the change in the sales mix the way that averages are. Compare that to the Terranet National Bank Index, and you can see that it's late to the party as far as identifying turning points. For example, late 2008, early 2009, the economic doomageddon that we experienced, at least in the news. What happened was the MLS Home Price Index showed that it was beginning to decline even before we went into recession, whereas the Terranet National Bank Index was late in identifying that turning point, and indeed late identifying the turning point coming out of it. And it's pretty simple as to why that is. The Terranet National Bank Index is based on ladder registry data, which refers to closed sales, whereas the MLS Home Price Index refers to sales when the sale occurs, which is on the acceptance of an unconditional offer or on the removal of non-title conditions, which precedes closing date. So they're already using staler data in their index. So ours is a more accurate reflection of what's going on in the market at that time. And for that reason, it identifies turning points sooner. Just for fun, I put the new home price index that Statistics Canada publishes on there. It refers to new home construction. And as you can see, it doesn't do a very good job of reflecting reality. It's out of step with everything. And for that reason, Statistics Canada is looking at retooling it. And they've interviewed us and a number of others about how we go about constructing a better index. Here what I've done is I've put together a chart that shows median and average price compared to the MLS Home Price Index for the Van Island Real Estate Board. There is no Terranet National Bank Index for the Van Island Board, nor is there a New Home Price Index for the Van Island Real Estate Board area. So for that reason, they're not there. But let's take a look at the MLS Home Price Index compared to the average and the median price. You can see just how volatile median and average price is for Vancouver Island, for the Vancouver Island area. And the more and more smaller a geography that you're looking at, the more and more volatile average prices can become. Here's an example. I was talking about the HPI. It's a relative price measure. It's also available as a benchmark price, which underlies the entire home price index. So the benchmark price, this is for the composite, for the combination of all sales. This shows the benchmark price compared to average price and median price. And again, it shows just how volatile averages and medians can be based on the change in sales, in the mix of sales in any month. When the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board begins publishing, you can expect to see tables that look similar to this, in that you'll have it for the entire Vancouver Island area, as well as for each of the zones that make up the Vancouver Island area. And you'll have the current benchmark and HPI for the current month compared to 1 month ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, 3 years ago, and 5 years ago. Similar to, there's a thing, the summary report that'll be available. It's similar in format in that it compares for the entire board area and for each of the zones, the benchmark price in the HPI compared to a month ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, 3 years ago, and 5 years ago, and indeed in this case, 10 years ago. The benchmark attribute report. It's another thing that's available. What it is, it's the descriptions of all the benchmark housing types in each of the geographies covered by the HPI. So it gives you a complete rundown of those benchmark housing descriptions for any of the geographies covered.